The party hums around you like a living organism, its pulse beating through conversations that overlap and interweave. You stand near the kitchen counter, fingers wrapped around a glass you've been nursing for 40 minutes, watching the choreography of social ease unfold before you. There's Marcus, throwing his head back in laughter, his voice cutting through 3 different conversations without missing a beat. There's Alina, seamlessly floating from group to group, her energy seeming to multiply with each interaction rather than diminish. And then there's you, calculating, always calculating. 17 minutes since you arrived. 3 more conversations you should probably join. 2 exits you've already mapped. 1 growing ache behind your temples that whispers what you already know. Your internal battery is draining faster than anyone else's seems to be. You smile, you nod, you contribute the perfect observation at just the right moment, earning appreciative laughter. To everyone watching, you're fully there, fully engaged, but inside, something ancient and wordless is crying out for silence, for space, for the blessed relief of an empty room where you can finally stop performing the exhausting act of being on. And then it comes, as it always does, the guilt. That familiar visitor who slides in beside your exhaustion and whispers, "What's wrong with you? These are good people. This is supposed to be fun. Everyone else seems fine. Why can't you just ... be normal?" But here's what that voice doesn't understand. What took me years to learn. You're not broken. You're not antisocial. You're not missing some essential piece that everyone else was born with. You're simply wired with a different relationship to stimulation, as if you were born with an internal dimmer switch that processes the world's brightness more intensely than others. Think of it this way: imagine every social interaction, every sound, every unexpected change as light pouring into a room. For some people, that light energizes them, makes them glow brighter. They're like solar panels, converting external energy into internal fuel. But for others, for you, perhaps that same light needs to be carefully regulated. Too much, too fast, too bright, and the circuitry overloads. Not because you're weak, but because you're processing everything at a deeper frequency. This isn't about hating people. God knows, some of the most people-loving souls I've encountered are the ones who need to retreat after giving their presence so fully. It's about recognizing that presence itself costs you something different than it costs others. Where they might pay pennies, you're spending gold coins. Where they're making deposits of energy, you're writing checks your body needs time alone to cover. The real tragedy isn't that you function this way. The real tragedy is that somewhere along the line, we decided there was only one right way to exist in the world: loud, constant, always available. We built a culture that mistakes depth for deficiency, that confuses the need for solitude with rejection of community. And in that confusion, millions of us learned to wear masks that slowly suffocate who we really are. But naming something is the first step to reclaiming it. So let me name this for you. Introversion isn't a character flaw or a social disability. It's a legitimate pattern of energy and attention that, when misunderstood, becomes guilt and self-betrayal, but when recognized and honored, transforms into depth, authentic presence, and the kind of contribution that changes conversations with a single, well-considered thought. Before we dive deeper, let's clear the fog with 3 simple questions. Do you actually enjoy people when you're not exhausted? Does the thought of people fill you with fear or just fatigue? How much stimulation can you genuinely handle before your inner dimmer starts screaming for adjustment? If you found yourself nodding, if something in your chest just unclenched a little, then stay with me, because this isn't about becoming someone else. This is about finally becoming who you've always been. Picture this: the burning bush has spoken, the call has been issued, and the man chosen to confront empires and lead millions through the wilderness, does something remarkable. He doesn't leap forward with confidence. He doesn't suddenly transform into a charismatic revolutionary. Instead, Moses does what so many of us do when the spotlight swings our way. He argues with God about why he's the wrong person for the job. "I am not eloquent," he says. "I am slow of speech and tongue." In other translations, "I'm heavy-mouthed. Words stick in my throat. When everyone else flows like rivers, I'm made of stones and long silences." Can you feel the familiar ache in those words? The same one that rises in your chest when someone says, "You should speak up more in meetings," or "Why don't you just network more?" Moses stands at the edge of destiny, and his first instinct isn't to pretend he's someone else. It's to name his limits with startling honesty. But here's what changes everything. God doesn't say, "Fine, I'll transform you into an orator." Instead, the divine response is breathtakingly practical. "Then Aaron will speak for you, not instead of you, but for you. Your brother will be your voice, but the vision, the depth, the steady presence that remains yours." I think about Moses retreating into the tent of meeting, seeking solitude between each crushing interaction with Pharaoh, each exhausting negotiation with his own restless people. The text tells us he would enter alone, and the cloud would descend, and in that profound quiet, clarity would emerge, not through committee meetings or brainstorming sessions, but through deliberate withdrawal into sacred silence. This wasn't weakness. This was wisdom embodied. Moses understood something revolutionary. You don't have to betray your nature to fulfill your purpose. You can say, "This is where I need support." You can structure your leadership around your actual capacity rather than some impossible ideal. You can be the one who thinks deeply rather than speaks quickly, who leads through consistency rather than charisma, who changes the world not despite your need for solitude but because of the clarity it brings. When you watch him navigate those 40 years in the wilderness, you see a leader who never becomes the center of the party. He delegates. He disappears into the mountain for 40 days, explaining that absence in today's world of constant availability. He processes divine visions alone before bringing them to the people. He leads not from the middle of the crowd but from the edges, from the liminal spaces where depth is born. And still, empires fell before him. Still, seas parted. Still, a nation was born. The message whispers across millennia. Your way of being present is not a consolation prize. It's not what you settle for when you can't be normal. It's a different kind of power. Entirely the kind that comes from knowing your edges and honoring them, from asking for what you need without apology, from leading with the strength you actually have rather than the strength you're supposed to have. Moses knew his edges because he'd lived with them since childhood. Perhaps he was the boy who watched the other Hebrew children play before joining, who formed one deep friendship rather than 10 surface ones, who needed the rhythm of predictable days to feel safe in an unpredictable world. We don't know his childhood, but we know his adulthood bears all the marks of someone born with what researchers now call a highly sensitive nervous system, a biological reality as innate as eye color, as fundamental as breath. Some children arrive in this world with their antennae already extended, picking up subtleties others miss entirely. The scratch of a wool sweater that other kids ignore feels like sandpaper on their skin. The fluorescent buzz in a classroom that nobody else notices becomes a constant intrusion. The emotional undercurrent in a room, mom's hidden sadness, dad's unspoken anger registers in their bodies before anyone speaks a word. This isn't imagination or oversensitivity, it's neurology. Brain scans show that highly sensitive people process information more deeply, their neural highways lighting up like Christmas trees where others show gentle glows. They're not making things up, they're literally experiencing more of what's already there. But here's where the story turns. When this temperament, this gift of depth, meets a world that rewards quick answers over thoughtful ones, loud confidence over quiet wisdom, something breaks. Not in the temperament itself, but in the relationship between who we are and who we're told to be. A child raises her hand only after the moment has passed. Too slow, the world says. She prefers reading to parties. Antisocial, they label her. She needs time alone after school to process the day's intensity. What's wrong with her? Parents worry. And slowly, experience by experience, a belief crystallizes like ice in her chest. If I can't perform the way they need me to, I don't belong. This belief becomes an operating system, running beneath every interaction. The strategies it spawns are exhausting. Force yourself to be on constantly, even as your body screams for retreat. Or swing the other way, withdraw completely. Build walls so high that loneliness becomes your only companion. Either way, you lose. Either way, you're living someone else's life. The attachment researchers tell us something profound. Consistent care creates an internal map of safety. But when the care comes with conditions, I'll love you when you're more outgoing. I'll be proud when you speak up. The nervous system learns hypervigilance. Your dimmer gets stuck on high alert, scanning for danger even in safety. Unable to rest even in solitude, because rest itself has become associated with the guilt of not being enough. Let me be clear about something crucial. Introversion is not social anxiety, though they can dance together. If you're not just drained by social situations, but terrified if the thought of interaction brings panic that disrupts your work, your relationships, your sleep, that's pain that deserves support. Not to fix your temperament, but to heal the wounds that have attached themselves to it. Here are two truths to carry forward. Bodies that receive consistent understanding learn to trust their own rhythms. Bodies that are constantly pushed past their limits learn that nowhere is safe, not even their own skin. Those same truths we just explored about sensitive nervous systems and the wounds of not fitting in, they create a trap so elegant in its cruelty that you might not even realize you're caught. It's the kind of prison where you hold the keys but can't see the lock. Here's how it works. You possess something extraordinary. You notice the shift in energy when someone's heart breaks behind their smile. You hear the unspoken question beneath the spoken one. You hold space for thoughts to mature into wisdom rather than rushing them out, half-formed. In a world of quick takes and hot reactions, you're the one who brings depth to the conversation, who asks the question that changes everything, who listens with such presence that people feel truly seen for the first time in years. But this same world that desperately needs what you offer has convinced you it's a deficiency. Speed is valued over accuracy. Volume is mistaken for confidence. First thoughts are rewarded while fourth thoughts, your thoughts, the ones that come after reflection, arrive too late for applause. So you face an impossible choice, the same one Moses faced at that burning bush. Do you force yourself into a costume that was never cut for your shape? Stand in front of Pharaoh, pretending to be Aaron, wearing a mask of eloquence that cracks under pressure. You try this path first. Most of us do. You practice being louder, faster, more. You pre-game conversations in your head, rehearsing spontaneity until the irony makes you dizzy. You say yes to every invitation, stay at every party until the end, volunteer for every presentation. And it works, for a while. People say, you've really come out of your shell, as if your authentic self was something to escape from. But your body keeps score. Headaches bloom like thorns. Sleep becomes restless. Your dreams full of crowds you can't escape. You succeed at being someone else and fail at being yourself. And the exhaustion is so bone deep that eventually, inevitably, you swing to the opposite extreme. The withdrawal, the great disappearing act. If forcing yourself to perform hurts this much, maybe the answer is to stop showing up altogether. You decline invitations before they're extended. You eat lunch alone, work with headphones on, create such distance that connection becomes impossible. The walls you build for protection become a prison of your own making. You're safe but alone, preserved but purposeless, intact but invisible. Moses could have chosen either path. He could have pretended to be the eloquent revolutionary God seemed to be seeking, burned himself out trying to be Aaron, or he could have stayed a shepherd forever, tending sheep in Midian's quiet hills, never returning to Egypt at all. Instead, he found a third way, not transformation, not abdication, but negotiation. He said, "This is my edge. I need support here." He created structures that honored his limitations while leveraging his strengths. He spoke through Aaron but led with vision. He withdrew to the mountain but returned with clarity. He showed us that the answer isn't becoming someone else or disappearing entirely. The answer is giving language to your quiet presence, explaining your edges without apology, adjusting your dimmer with intention rather than letting others flood you with their light. That third way, we just explored the path of negotiation rather than transformation or disappearance, starts with learning the language your body has been speaking all along. Because before your mind admits you're overwhelmed, your shoulders already know, carrying tension like stones. Before you consciously register the depletion, your jaw has been clenched for hours, grinding through another performance of being on. It's Tuesday evening, for back-to-back meetings have colonized your day, each one demanding a different version of you: strategic thinker, supportive colleague, creative problem solver, enthusiastic team player. You walk through your front door and see faces you love more than life itself, but something inside you has gone mute. Your word account is overdrawn. Your partner asks about your day. Your child needs help with homework. And all you can think about is the bathroom door, not because you need the bathroom, but because it's the only room with a lock where silence is socially acceptable. This isn't cruelty. This is depletion. Your body is telling you what Moses knew instinctively. Even leaders need the tent of meeting, that sacred space where no one else can follow. The signals are everywhere if you learn to read them. That vacation with friends where you loved every moment but returned needing a vacation from the vacation. Your nervous system processing a week's worth of constant companionship like a computer running too many programs at once. The family reunion where you hide in the kitchen, washing dishes no one asked you to wash, because the repetitive motion and singular focus feel like medicine. The conference where you skip the networking lunch to walk alone around the block, pretending you have an important call, when really you're just calling yourself back home. And then there's the meeting where the perfect insight rises in your throat, fully formed and precisely worded, but the moment passes before you can wedge it into the rapid-fire discussion. 2 hours later, driving home, it emerges again, brilliant, useless, too late. Your mind works in depths, not surfaces. It needs space to dive down and bring up pearls. But the world keeps demanding immediate responses, plastic beads instead of treasures. But notice the other side too. The coffee with just one friend where 2 hours feel like minutes, where the conversation goes so deep you both forget to check your phones. The project you work on alone, undisturbed, where time becomes liquid and innovation flows like water. The single comment you offer in a meeting that shifts the entire discussion. Because you waited, you watched, you understood what was really being asked. Your body knows exactly where your edges are. That headache that blooms after every party isn't punishment. It's communication. That bone-deep satisfaction after an evening alone with a book isn't antisocial. It's restoration. That irritation that rises when plans suddenly change isn't rigidity. It's your nervous system saying, I had calibrated for something else. Moses didn't apologize for needing 40 days on the mountain. He didn't explain or justify. He simply went, knowing that what he would bring back from that silence would be worth more than 40 days of noise. Your body is trying to teach you the same lesson. Honoring your limits isn't weakness. It's the only way to offer your gifts without destroying yourself in the process. Your body has been teaching you, and now it's time to translate that wisdom into words the world can understand. This isn't about constructing elaborate excuses or apologizing for your nature. This is about what Moses did when he stood before the burning bush, naming reality with such clarity that even God adjusted the plan. Start with the language you use about yourself. Notice how "I'm weird" sits in your chest like a stone, while "this is how I'm wired" feels like opening a window. The shift isn't semantic, it's revolutionary. When someone calls after your long day and your word well has run dry, try this: "I want to connect with you, and right now I need some quiet to refill." It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about how I regenerate. Watch how truth, simply stated, creates space where shame used to live. When they suggest the group dinner with 12 people you've never met, you don't have to choose between forcing yourself through it or vanishing entirely. Moses didn't. He said, "Let Aaron speak." You can say, "Could I meet you for coffee first?" I connect better in smaller settings. You're not rejecting connection. You're requesting the conditions where connection actually happens for you. The working world wants immediate answers, as if wisdom could be microwaved. But you know better. When someone demands instant brilliance, give them this gift. "Let me sit with that, and I'll have something meaningful for you tomorrow." You're teaching them that depth takes time, that your best insights come not from reflex, but from reflection. Structure your days like Moses structured his leadership, with built-in retreats to your own tent of meeting. Block 15 minutes between meetings, not for more email, but for silence. Create transition rituals as sacred as any ancient ceremony. The walk around the block that shifts you from work self to home self. The 3 deep breaths in your car before entering the house. The cup of tea sipped in absolute quiet before the evening begins. Your workspace can become a sanctuary. Suggest that some brainstorming happen in writing first. You think better with your fingers on keys than with voices overlapping. Request agenda items in advance so your deep processing mind can prepare treasures rather than scrambling for surface responses. These aren't accommodations, they're optimizations. At home, create a vocabulary for your needs. After social events, you might need what I call the decompression chamber. 20 minutes of no questions, no stories, just existence without performance. Your family isn't mind readers. They need you to teach them that your withdrawal isn't rejection. It's how you return to them whole rather than hollowed out. Here's your practice phrase collection. Each one a small act of self-respect. I want to help, and today my tank is empty. I can offer this piece fully. Beyond that, I can't guarantee quality. That deserves a thoughtful response scan. I sleep on it. I treasure our connection, and this pace exhausts me. Can we find a rhythm that works for both of us? If I step back, I'm not leaving you, I'm making sure I can return. Those practice phrases we just explored, they're not modern inventions. They're ancient wisdom, as old as that stuttering shepherd who stood before infinite fire and said, essentially, I want to help, and I don't have what you're asking for. Return with me to that moment. Moses doesn't undergo a personality transplant before accepting his calling. The burning bush doesn't remake his nervous system, doesn't transform him into someone who thrives in crowds and thinks in What happens instead is far more radical. The mission reshapes itself around the messenger. Think about what this means. The liberation of an entire people, the confrontation with empire, the birth of a nation, all of it flows through a man who needs his brother to speak for him. who disappears into mountains for weeks at a time, who leads not through charisma but through something deeper, quieter, more enduring. Moses shows us that God or life or purpose, or whatever you call that great calling, doesn't always want the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it wants the one who listens until they hear what everyone else is missing. Sometimes it wants the steady presence that stays when flashier leaders have burned themselves out. Sometimes it wants the one who thinks in 40-day increments rather than 40-second news cycles. Watch how he leads, not from the center of every gathering but from the edges, from that tent set apart where he could think, feel, process. His strength wasn't in working the crowd but in holding the vision when the crowd lost its way. He didn't inspire through soaring rhetoric but through stubborn, tender care that refused to abandon his difficult, demanding people even when they exhausted him, which they did, repeatedly. You know that exhaustion. You know what it's like to care so deeply that it depletes you, to hold space for others until you're hollow, to give from reserves you don't have because the need is so great and your heart is so full. Moses knew it too. Read between the lines of those wilderness years and you'll find a highly sensitive soul navigating the chaos of community, the weight of leadership, the impossibility of pleasing everyone. But he didn't quit. He didn't transform. He didn't pretend. He adjusted the conditions around him to match his capacity. He created structures, the 70 elders, to share the burden, the tent of meeting for solitude, Aaron for communication that honored his limitations while amplifying his gifts. Your quiet presence isn't a consolation prize for those who can't achieve real presence. It's a different form of power entirely. Where others bring fireworks, spectacular, brief, forgotten by morning, you bring the steady ember that actually keeps people warm through the night. Where others speak to fill silence, you speak to break it open with truth. Where others network, you go deep. Where others entertain, you witness. Where others perform, you presence. Moses never became Aaron. He never needed to. He led a nation to freedom by being exactly who he was, just with better boundaries and clearer support systems. The same calling extends to you, not to become someone else, but to become more skillfully, unapologetically yourself. We've traveled far together, you and I, from that party where you stood calculating exits and managing your dimmer, through Moses' tent of meeting, into the deep waters of your own nervous system. We've named the exhaustion that comes from performing a version of yourself that was never true. We've witnessed how even prophets negotiate their edges. And now, here at the end, that's really a beginning. I want to return to that fundamental truth we planted together in the opening moments. Introversion isn't a character flaw or social disability. It's a legitimate pattern of energy and attention that, when misunderstood, becomes guilt and self-betrayal, but when recognized and honored, transforms into depth, authentic presence, and the kind of contribution that changes everything with a single, considered thought. Remember Sarah from that family gathering, the one with the invisible antenna. She learned something Moses knew. The things that make you different aren't obstacles to overcome but instruments to master. Your sensitivity to subtext, your need for depth over surface, your way of thinking in spirals rather than straight lines, these aren't bugs in your programming. They're features, rare ones, necessary ones. The world is drowning in noise, desperate for depth. It's choking on hot takes, starving for considered thought. It doesn't need another person pretending to be excited about small talk. It needs you, bringing your full presence to one real conversation. It doesn't need you networking frantically at conferences. It needs you having coffee with someone whose life you'll actually change because you listened with your whole self. Moses led a nation to freedom not by becoming someone else but by being himself with better scaffolding. His story whispers across centuries. You don't have to betray your nature to fulfill your purpose. You just have to name it, claim it, and create structures that support it. So here's my invitation, as gentle as it is revolutionary. Choose one small act of self-respect in the next 24 hours. One moment where you honor your wiring instead of apologizing for it. Maybe you'll leave the party when your body says it's time, not when social convention demands. Maybe you'll ask for that agenda in advance so your deep processing mind can prepare gifts instead of grasping for words. Maybe you'll send that email with the brilliant insight that came to you 3 hours after the meeting ended, because wisdom doesn't expire. Do it. Then notice your breathing afterward. Notice how your shoulders drop when you stop carrying the weight of being someone else. Notice how your real voice sounds when it's not fighting through a costume. If this conversation has stirred up something that feels bigger than preference, something that carries the weight of trauma or the edge of panic, please reach for professional support. There's no shame in needing help to sort temperament from wound, nature from injury. But for tonight, for this moment, let this be your benediction and your beginning. Your silence isn't absence, it's presence at a frequency the noisy world needs desperately to hear. You don't have to shout to matter. Your quiet revolution starts with simply being who you've always been, just without the apology. The burning bush is still burning, and it's calling your name, not to transform you, but to deploy you, exactly as you are, exactly as you were meant to be.